Every season of Stranger Things has a slightly different vibe and flavor to it. Where season 4 turned the dial all the way up on the show's mystery and horror elements, season 5 has leaned more into action and fantasy. It feels like the action movie version of Stranger Things. Even though we are seeing Stranger Things through a different lens, the core aspects of the show remain the same, with the show being firmly rooted in the characters and their journeys. It is the strong central focus that I think has made people fall in love with the show and come back to it again and again. I feel like some of the most fun I've had so far this season is just watching these characters interact, whether it be seeing familiar dynamics like the party being reunited, or previously underexplored pairings like Mike and Nancy, or entirely new relationships that have quickly become some of the show's best friendships, like Will and Robin. The point stands that Stranger Things shines brightest when we get to see these characters interact with each other and grow from said interactions. I've seen some very strong opinions about Volume 1 of Season 5, with some people claiming it to be the best the show has ever been, and others thinking that it has completely lost the plot and is utter garbage. I think talking about an incomplete season of television can at times be tricky, because we aren't seeing the full picture and what everything is leading towards. Some moments that might feel out of place could end up being further fleshed out down the line, and in the end have a great payoff. With that said, I think Volume 1 has done a really good job setting up the back half of the season, while simultaneously giving us some incredible moments right out of the gate. I have a lot of thoughts on Volume 1, as well as where I think we might be headed in the second half of the season. In this video, I will discuss what I think worked so far in Season 5, as well as what I think doesn't work. I will be looking at the storylines of Volume 1 in detail, so I will be going into full spoilers.
Does it crawl what? Are we in the 30s now? And not a single baddie in sight? Elle can't find him in her bath. And Will hasn't had his goosies since the shake and quake.
I like a lot of the initial setup for Season 5. In previous seasons, our characters would start off vibing and living their normal lives, before the Upside Down would rear its ugly head and force them back into a fight for their lives. Where we start in Season 5, their normal lives have become anything but normal, as they are already in an ongoing fight against the Upside Down, as they try to find Vecna and defeat him once and for all. Where Season 4 saw a lot of the characters split up all over the world, like in Russia and California, Season 5 keeps the conflict in characters all centralized to Hawkins, which is something that I appreciate, as it allows the audience to be fully invested in one area, rather than having their attention pulled all over the place. The Squawk serves as the group's main base of operations, which is a really fun location that I think is used well in the context of the story. We continue the tradition of seeing Steve and Robin take on another new job, with Robin being the radio MC and Steve being her sound effects guy. The first broadcast we see does a great job of filling in the viewer on everything that has happened since the Season 4 finale. Speaking of where we left off in Season 4, its end point of the final gate being opened and the Upside Down leaking into Hawkins feels a little glossed over here. I kind of expected this would happen just based on how long it was between seasons and how it would be hard to pick up exactly where we left off, but it is definitely a bit annoying. I actually think the excuse of the military patching it up as quick as possible with its big metal band-aid is a decent way to try and explain why the rift isn't still open. Still, this feels like a pretty hard pivot from where we left off in Season 4, and it does feel a little unsatisfying. I really like the idea of the crawls and how the group has been hunting Vecna ever since the end of Season 4.
Even if it takes 100 more crawls, 1,000. We don't stop until we're goddamn sure that wrinkled, noseless, rotting bastard is dead and gone and never coming back.
I like how they all have their established roles within the crawl, with Murray being the smuggler, getting them supplies and information, Robin sending them messages through the radio, giving them the details of when a crawl is to take place, how Nancy and Mike act as their respective leaders for their little squads, and how Hopper ends up as the boots on the ground, the man who ends up in the Upside Down, and actually carries out the search. It's really cool seeing them get down to business, as with the level of efficiency they display, you can tell that they've been doing this for a while. Also, if it wasn't already clear enough that Steve was the Fred of the older kids' mystery gang, they went ahead and made him a van guy.
Oh, come to Papa!
Although there were a couple times when he was driving when I couldn't help but be like,
Keep your eyes on the road, Fred! Like, holy shit!
Even though the show seemingly changes course from where we left off in season 4, I think it does a good job re-establishing the stakes and the roles each of the characters will play moving forward.
This is exactly what happened to Will at almost exactly the same time.
I think it was a really great decision to bring Holly Wheeler into the spotlight, and the implementation of her throughout the season, as well as the importance placed on the other kids, does a really good job of reinforcing some of the youthful innocence that was present during the earlier seasons of the show. Vecna's renewed interest in abducting children feels like it calls back to Will's initial disappearance in season 1, and gets the audience wondering why he is so interested in them and what his ultimate plans for them are. He is giving major creeper vibes as he tries to manipulate and control these kids, taking a completely different approach from what he did in season 4. I also really love that a lot of the focus centers on trying to find Holly after she has gone missing, something that mirrors season 1 with Will's disappearance. Now, their experience while being lost in the Upside Down has been a little different, with Holly baking cakes and dancing around, whereas Will was running for his life, but I still really like the idea of the show coming full circle. The show does a great job of establishing Holly as a character, as in previous seasons, she was kind of just there every now and then.
This is the first time she's taking center stage, and so we try to spend a lot of the first episode allowing the audience to really get to know her and care for her.
They establish right away that she has been interacting with something supernatural, with her imaginary friend Mr. Whatsit, who turns out to be Vecna, earning him yet another name. At least for me, it felt pretty obvious that Mr. Whatsit was Vecna.
It was pretty obvious.
And so when they try to have it be a big reveal at the end of episode 2 with Karen writing out his name, I felt like it fell a little flat. I really loved the conversation between Mike and Holly, as we get to see Mike acting as a big brother and doing his best to comfort his sister.
I get scared sometimes too.
No, you don't.
Are you kidding? Everyone in Hawkins is scared shitless. Anyone who says they aren't are full of it.
I feel like him giving her the miniature of Holly the Heroic is him telling her that she has the strength within her to be brave, and I think it's a really sweet moment. There's a lot of potential foreshadowing in this conversation, as Mike says that as a cleric, Holly the Heroic can open dimension doors.
She can cast a dimension door, which can teleport you to anywhere you visualize.
Which makes me think she will somehow create an exit to free herself and Max from their prison in Vecna's mindscape. The attack on the Wheeler's house is a really great set piece, and the first real oh shit moment of the season. I think it was great seeing the Demogorgon headed to the Wheeler's house through Will's demovision, as with all communications at the Squawk Fried, they are helpless to warn the Wheelers what is headed their way. For much of the show, the Wheeler house has been a place of sanctuary, with it being the kids' main base of operations to hide out from the Upside Down and the goons at Hawkins' lab. No matter what horrors they faced with the Upside Down, they could always go to the Wheeler's house and feel safe.
You know you're welcome here anytime.
By the Demogorgon attacking it and destroying it, it really feels like one of the characters' safe havens is gone. Losing that place of security feels really impactful. I love the contrast between the obliviousness of Ted and Karen having no idea what's headed their way, with the terror and adrenaline coursing through Nancy and Mike as they try to get home before it's too late. I thought Karen and Holly hiding in the bathtub was a really cool moment and added to the suspense of the scene, as you fear them being unable to hold their breath long enough and the Demogorgon finding them. However, it seems like all of Karen's time at the public pool paid off, as she was able to hold her breath long enough for Ted to unwittingly cause a distraction. As much flack as Ted gets for things like not knowing his daughter's age, which, to be fair, is actually a really hard question.
Gosh, Batman, that one stumps me.
He does his best here to find his family and try to protect them. Unfortunately for him, he gets clawed and yeeted through a wall. Karen also has a great moment as she stands up to the Demogorgon and stabs the hell out of it with her wine bottle.
Not my daughter, you bitch!
After being oblivious for so many years, it's cool seeing them interact with the Upside Down. I think there was a really good editing choice here to cut away from Karen and to follow from Nancy's point of view as she enters the house.
You wanted to feel what Nancy felt like in that moment. You wanted the audience to be with Nancy and the horror when she sees Karen like this.
Because the last thing the audience saw was Karen messing up the Demogorgon, it is as emotionally gutting for the audience as it is for Nancy when she walks in to find her mom in a bloody mess on the ground and Holly missing. I think Natalia Dyer, Nancy's actress, is absolutely phenomenal in this moment, as well as in its aftermath, as she feels such horror, shock, and guilt at seeing her parents like this. The scene with her in the bathroom trying to wash off her mother's blood is heart-wrenching, and her performance really sucks the audience in, making them feel what she feels in this moment. There's also a really cool shot of the gate to the Upside Down closing, as we see Nancy by her mother's side. Now, despite this being a really cool scene, I've seen some discourse online talking about how the show pulled its punches a little, as both Ted and Karen at this point are still alive, their wounds by the Demogorgon being non-fatal. I can 100% understand where this criticism is coming from, as deaths add stakes to stories, and the killing of both Wheeler parents in one fell swoop would be a really bold move to start off the season. The Duffer Brothers have even said that they wanted this moment to show that nobody was safe.
I think it shows right away in the season that no one is safe, no place is safe, none of our characters are safe.
I do think that both of them surviving kind of undercuts this message, as being in such a dire situation and still coming out alive kind of shows their hand, and that despite what they say, not all of the main characters are actually in danger of being killed off. I can understand why this would bother some people, but I don't find it to be much of an issue for me. Stranger Things isn't a show that I think needs a massive body count to still be compelling. A lot of its DNA is based off old 80s movies, where even though the heroes found themselves in dangerous situations while on an adventure, for the most part, they made it out relatively unscathed. I think a good character death can definitely enhance the show, but I don't think it is entirely necessary for a quarter of the cast to be wiped out in an attempt to make the show more realistic. Characters dying does not in itself make a good story. It's how those deaths are used to affect the story moving forward that makes the deaths meaningful.
It's important that every death resonates in a big way, which is why we don't kill so many people, or we're very careful who we kill, because it has these massive season-long ripple effects. Because otherwise it just doesn't feel like it has any weight to it.
To this point, I feel like Stranger Things has done a good job with how it has used death to enhance its story. I also know that by the season's end, there will be some character deaths, as there has been at least one significant character death every season, so I'm not really bothered by the Wheeler parents making it out of their encounter with the Demogorgon alive. After Holly has been taken to the Upside Down, we get to see her trapped in Vecna's mindscape, even though she is a pretty willing captive to start off. Vecna being able to rummage through her mind gives him the perfect tools to manipulate her and make her feel comfortable in a situation where she really shouldn't be. The appearance of Max in this place adds to the mysterious nature of the world that Vecna has created. It was interesting to see where Max's soul, consciousness, whatever, has been since her body was left an empty husk in the season 4 finale. Living in Vecna's memories seems like a nightmare of an existence. We also get further confirmation that even though physical media is pretty cool, streaming is superior in a lot of ways, as Max's escape from her hellish prison is prevented because Lucas had to rewind the tape. Knowing that Vecna is afraid of the memory surrounding the cave and refuses to go in is interesting, and I am sure it will be built on later in the season. I think Max and Holly's storyline in Vecna's mind will be one to watch, as it has the potential to build towards something really interesting.
In real life, you're more like a sorcerer, because your powers don't come from a book of spells, they're innate.
After being somewhat sidelined in season 4, Will is back to the forefront this season, with much of the story's focus centering on him, his initial disappearance, and his connection to Vecna and the Upside Down.
Will really is the heart and soul of season 5.
The show wastes no time in re-establishing Will's importance to the mythos of the show, as the season opens on a flashback to Will's time in the Upside Down. I like this idea of bringing everything back to the start of all things, and Will's disappearance. We get to see Vecna interact with a young Will, as he is seemingly a crucial part of Vecna's overarching plan.
We are going to do such beautiful things together. William.
Obviously, this is a retcon, and none of this was initially planned in Season 1, but I think it works well here, having Vecna be the invisible hand that has been secretly controlling everything. Will has had a really interesting journey so far in Season 5, with him initially being babied by his mother, as she has to learn to trust him. Will in general is kind of a shy, awkward kid, so even though he wants to push back against his mom's overprotective nature, he is hesitant to do so.
I can do it. I can monitor.
No, you're staying here.
No, Mom, I helped Dustin set up the antenna. I know how to work it.
Out of the question.
I think that's one of the reasons his relationship with Robin is so important this season, where Will is initially uncertain, not really having that much faith in himself or his ideas. Robin sees the value he brings to the group and encourages him to follow through on his plans. She gives him the confidence to ignore what his mom said and to go out and enact his own plan to try and get more information about his new vision. His plan ends up working, as he's once again able to tap into the hive mind and learn of Vecna's next target.
We have to act and we have to take risks, and thank God we did, because my plan, it actually worked.
I feel like this gives him a much needed confidence boost and allows him to slowly come into his own. In Volume 1, much of Will's story is about his new developing abilities, as well as learning to accept himself. What I love about Will's journey is that these two things are intrinsically tied together, and the more he is able to love himself, the more his abilities develop. Will's abilities are no longer restricted to his little neck goosies. He almost develops the ability to warg into the hive mind, seeing through the eyes, I guess not eyes, teeth maybe? Whatever. Seeing through the perspective of the Demogorgons. He also has some sort of connection with Vecna, akin to the connection between Harry and Voldemort in Harry Potter. He can seemingly tap into Vecna's mind and see things Vecna doesn't want him to see, to feel things that Vecna feels.
He didn't want me there. I wasn't supposed to see it.
On his spiritual journey to self-acceptance, Robin plays the role of his Yoda. After seeing Robin and Vicky kissing and being about as conspicuous as he can, Will and Robin slowly start to build a friendship, as Will turns to Robin for advice.
Robin is kind of that supporter for Will throughout the season to help him find himself and come to terms with who he is.
With Robin being a few years older than Will, she has been able to accept herself for who she is, and she has grown to really love herself. Her self-doubt from previous seasons is gone, as she has completed her transformation into Rockin' Robin, a young woman who knows who she is and what she wants. She takes Will under her wing, imparting all of the lessons that she has learned over the years, and helps Will on his journey. She sees in Will the piece of herself that was scared of being rejected and unable to be honest with who she truly was. One of the highlights of the season is the conversation she has with Will about Tammy Thompson, and how she was so focused on Tammy, she didn't realize that the person she needed to focus on was herself. Her monologue about seeing her younger self and how free she used to be is beautiful.
Just needed to stop being so goddamn scared. Scared of who I really was once I did that. I felt so free. It's like I could fly.
I have to give mad props to Maya Hawke, as her performance in this scene is tremendous. I think this conversation is about Will accepting himself for who he is. He doesn't need to have a romantic relationship with Mike to find acceptance and love in his life. When Will eventually finds himself and his friends in a dire situation, Will is able to think back to what Robin said and really tap into his full potential, as he is no longer afraid of being his true self. I also love that the flashbacks we see are the moments from season 2 that Joyce, Jonathan, and Mike use to get through to Will when he is being controlled by the hive mind. Will getting his enhanced powers and saving Mike, Lucas, and Robin feels incredibly earned, and is probably the biggest highlight of Volume 1. I wouldn't expect someone can make wiping a bloody nose look cool, but when Will does it at the end of the episode, he manages just that. I also think it was really cool how when Will kills the Demogorgons, he kills them in a very Vecna-like manner. I think this further hints at the connection between the two characters. I almost get the vibe that Will developing these abilities is part of Vecna's plan, as he not only leaves Will alive, but in his speech to him, Vecna talks about Will being the first, and how he can reshape and control him. That paired with what he said at the end of the first scene of the season makes me think that Vecna still has big plans in store for Will moving forward.
There might be a way. A way to save Derek and find Holly.
Similarly to Will, I really appreciate that Mike was given a major role this season. He really is living up to his role as the heart of the party this year, as he has not only offered some great leadership, but he's really been there for his friends and family as he puts his life on the line.
He's gone more back into season 1 mode, where he is much more comfortable, I think, with himself and much more comfortable with creating plans.
With Holly disappearing and their parents being attacked, this season feels even more personal for Mike and Nancy. Mike is completely focused on the mission at hand, fighting against Vecna in the Upside Down.
We find Vecna, and we end this once and for all.
It was great seeing him take a lead role in planning the crawl, and he also provides some pretty great plans throughout the rest of the season. He's the one who really nails down the details of what would become the Turnboat Trap. The Turnboat Trap is actually a really great sequence, evoking Home Alone as the gang booby traps the Turnboat's house in preparation for the Demogorgon's imminent arrival to try and kidnap Derek. It was great seeing Mike using a barbed wired shovel to fight off the Demogorgon, a massive upgrade from his weapon of choice in season 2, which was a candlestick. Mike was also one of the main minds behind the attempt to rescue the children from the military. And while the attempt was fun, but ultimately failed, Mike's moment to shine comes after they are caught, and the Upside Down launches its attack. It was a really great moment seeing Mike protect the kids as he tried to navigate his way through a battlefield.
Because it almost feels like we're kind of protecting our younger characters or our younger selves.
In the middle of the battle, there is a long oneer as we follow Mike trying to lead the kids to safety amidst the carnage. I think this long one shot really adds to the chaos and frenetic energy of the scene, as the audience is right there in the thick of it with Mike and company.
Follow them as if you're like a documentary crew through this war zone, seeing these horrors.
I really love the Battle of the Maxi, especially what it does for characters like Will, Mike, and even Lucas, who's also putting his life on the line to protect the kids. Seeing the Demogorgons rip open gates and attack the soldiers like a bat out of hell is really awesome. Vecna's entrance is also a masterclass as he begins to brutally kill the soldiers, with him pulling the grenade pins in a cheeky move and using his Groot hand to face blast them. However, I do have a bit of a complaint surrounding the scene, and that is how the military doesn't really seem that equipped to fight the creatures from the Upside Down, despite their growing knowledge. Almost all of the soldiers are equipped with guns, which are effective in slowing down the Demogorgons, but are ultimately unable to truly kill them. Instead, the soldiers should have been armed to the teeth with fire-based weapons, instead of having one designated flamethrower guy. It's like they chose not to exploit their enemies' weaknesses. We only really get one Mike and Eleven scene in Volume 1, but I think it is a really nice scene, as the two look to the future and a life beyond the fight they currently find themselves in. I'm looking forward to seeing more interactions between them in the rest of the season, and I'm hopeful that Mike will continue to have a major focus this season.
Thank you
For what?
for teaching me and trusting me.
I've been a little mixed on some of the 11 Hopper stuff so far this season. I think the idea of them being in the Upside Down and searching for Holly is pretty compelling. However, some of their conversations while searching for her felt a little forced, and like they were trying to shoehorn the word punk ass in as many times as they could.
Stubborn punk ass.
A stubborn punk ass?
Stubborn punk ass.
A stubborn punk ass?
Stubborn punk ass. You're stubborn punk ass, you know that, right?
I do think they have some cool scenes, like Hopper taking out the patrol while Eleven is incapacitated, and when they duo interrogate the survivor of the encounter. But despite those scenes, there were quite a few moments that I didn't really think worked well. For starters, after interrogating Akers and seeing a door in his mind, Eleven is convinced that the military have captured Vecna, and that they are using their new technology to neutralize his powers. However, this makes no sense as a theory, and as the audience, we know this to not be true. We have seen Vecna acting as Henry, using his powers to coerce and manipulate the children of Hawkins. If he was being held prisoner by the military, he would be unable to use his powers and do the things that we have seen him do. Hopper even points this out to Eleven, but it falls on deaf ears.
He's effectiveness in there. He doesn't have his powers. If he doesn't have his powers, how could he have anything to do with Holly's kidnapping?
This intention intentional misdirection of trying to convince the audience that Vecna is the one that is captured feels really sloppy. For me, it was really obvious that 8 was going to be the actual military hostage, as her existence was a loose end that the show needed to address at some point. Even though I hated the episode that focused on 8 and her crew of cronies in season 2, I'm actually excited to see what her role in the story will be moving forward. And I think it makes perfect sense to bring her back in this spot. It just kind of failed as a big reveal. Knowing that it's 8 that is a prisoner and not Vecna also makes Hopper's fake out suicide mission fall flat, as the audience knows that he isn't going to have to sacrifice himself to kill Vecna. It feels a little cheap, and if Hopper does end up dying later in the season, it will slightly lessen the impact of such a moment. There's also this weird focus on how Akers peed on the giant wall.
He peed on it. That soldier. He said he peed on the big wall.
Yeah, no, I heard what you said. I just don't know why you're talking about it.
Maybe he knows what it is. He peed on it.
It's brought up multiple times that Akers might know something because he peed on it, and this line of questioning just feels really odd to me. Even though it's not without its merits, I felt the Hopper 11 storyline had some of the weakest content in Volume 1.
Job for good old Steve Harrington. I actually think this might be a better job for Jonathan Byers.
The Steve, Jonathan, Nancy love triangle has been one of the most maligned storylines of season 5, and I can understand why people don't really like it. It feels like a bit of a retread of a similar storyline from earlier seasons with the exact same characters, except now some of them have switched positions in the triangle. Many viewers have already moved past this plot point and are frustrated that the show has brought it up again.
Move past it, will you?
And while I agree it's not always the most interesting to watch, it does kind of make sense from a character perspective, at least in terms of Steve and Jonathan. Jonathan and Nancy's relationship was rocky in season 4, as they had to deal with long distance, and Jonathan was actively lying to Nancy about going to the same college as her. Now that Jonathan is back in Hawkins, it makes sense that he's feeling insecure, especially as he doesn't really know what he wants out of life moving forward. He's finding himself forced to interact with Steve, someone who he never liked and who has had a romantic history with Nancy. Steve also seemingly looks to have things a little more put together than Jonathan does, as Steve's struggles the past few seasons have reforged him a better person and someone who knows what he wants out of life.
Actually, grown up quite a bit, you know?
Yeah, I'm sure.
The scene where Jonathan and Steve race up the radio tower is Jonathan's insecurity on full display. Steve volunteering to be the one to do the dangerous climb is completely in character for him, as over the last few seasons, he constantly takes on the physically challenging and dangerous jobs to protect the others in the group. I honestly don't think Steve is trying to show off here, as it is the role he has found himself in countless times before. I think by Jonathan inserting himself and insisting that he be the one to climb the tower is him trying to compete with Steve and show Nancy that he is just as good as her ex, Beau. Steve's response to try and race Jonathan to the top, I think, is his competitive drive coming through, as he has a lifelong experience of playing sports, as well as him trying to keep his role in the group. Steve isn't an idiot, but he knows his value to the group comes from his physical capabilities and his willingness to put himself in dangerous situations to protect the others. I think in this moment he feels a little threatened by Jonathan trying to take over his role. I actually really enjoyed the scene in the van where Steve and Jonathan fight and call each other out. I think they both really care about Nancy, they just have different ways of showing it. After they hear what happened to her parents, Steve wants to go to the hospital and comfort her, whereas Jonathan thinks the best thing they can do for Nancy is to find her missing sister. I think Jonathan is 100% right in what Nancy would want them to do, but I think both of their suggestions are coming from a genuine place. I think them fighting and telling each other exactly what they think of the other is good setup for an eventual resolution in Volume 2. I think when things matter most, they will put their differences aside, and should Nancy find herself in a dire situation, they will both rise to the occasion and do all they can to help her and each other. The overall quality of this storyline and whether it was worth further exploring is pretty heavily dependent on its ultimate resolution, and so for the time being, we will just have to wait and see what what comes of it.
I can't just be like you guys and turn the other cheek while they spread their bullshit about Hellfire, about Eddie.
Similarly to how Max was heavily affected by Billy's death, Dustin's arc in Season 5 is driven by his grief over the passing of Eddie. His angst and attitude is a really strong juxtaposition from the relatively happy-go-lucky kid he has been in every other season. I think it's an interesting direction to take his character, as it forces the show to change up the dynamics with a lot of his strongest relationships. He is angry how people see Hellfire as a cult, and Eddie as a murderer. Unlike his friends, he isn't willing to simply move on and let Eddie's memory be tarnished. He is a little resentful towards his friends, and how they have seemingly moved on, their entire attention being directed to defeating Vecna, rather than being split like his own, as he tries to get justice for Eddie. He is pushing his friends away with his erratic behavior, seemingly looking to be provocative and cause trouble.
Telling you, he's lost his mind.
Also, from an outsider's perspective, who doesn't know what really happened, Dustin is showing up to school wearing clothing of a satanic cult and constantly talking about how good a guy the local mass murderer was. It's kind of understandable why Andy and his goons are picking on him. Also, by constantly bringing Eddie and Hellfire up and antagonizing the jocks, he is only ensuring his own prolonged harassment and the defiling of Eddie's grave. He is fighting two battles, and it is having an impact on his relationships and his ability to be there for the things that really matter. One of the most interesting things, in my opinion, that has come from Dustin's struggles is the tension that has surfaced between him and Steve. Where in previous seasons they have had a really wholesome friendship, this season sees Dustin being pretty antagonistic towards Steve. He is constantly insulting Steve's intelligence, something he knows that Steve is a bit insecure about.
You don't know how to do the most basic thing like prevent a power surge.
He is lying to Steve about what is actually going on with him, and he is actively ignoring Steve's attempts to help him.
En route to the squad.
When you fell off your bike, it was Andy and his goons, wasn't it? I have shown nothing but concern for you since forever, and I have been repeatedly ignored.
Watching their interactions in these episodes, you get the impression that this has been going on for a while, as they are unable to really communicate. From Steve's side of things, he almost feels like a single dad who doesn't know how to be there for his son who has gone through something traumatic. He knows that Dustin is hurting, and he knows that Dustin is lying to him about what is actually going on. However, so long as Dustin remains closed off and doesn't let Steve in, there isn't much he can really do. As a result, I think Steve is getting frustrated that he is unable to help Dustin, and has started to snip at him, taking out some of his own anger on his friend, the tension between them building. I know a lot of people weren't necessarily loving this development in the Steve-Dustin friendship, but I actually think it is really interesting and has the potential for a massive payoff. I feel like seeing them struggle to communicate at first, only for them to then open up about how they are hurting, has massive potential for an incredible moment later in the season. I didn't think Steve and Dustin got too much of a spotlight in Volume 1, with everything else going on with all the other characters. However, I think with them now in the Upside Down and headed towards Hawkins' lab to try and unravel the mystery of the wall, they will get much more of a focus in Volume 2.
We're hoping that episode 4 leads to a lot of discussion and a lot of excitement for the next part.
Volume 1 of Stranger Things was by no means perfect, but I think it did a good job in setting up some interesting storylines as well as further developing a lot of the characters. We also got some iconic moments from this volume, helping to keep the audience fully engaged in the story being told. Even though the scale and spectacle of Season 5 will continue to be huge, I have faith that the show will stay true to what has made it so successful over all of these years. I am excited to see how the rest of the season will play out, and am eagerly awaiting the next volumes of the season. If you somehow made it to the end of the video, I want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I would really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. It really helps out the channel. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.